Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Endless Celts Podcast. I'm delighted to be joined by Tony and Gal. But first of all, Tony, mate, how you doing?
I'm all good, mate. Just like yourself, a bit knackered after a hectic day at work, but aye, it's all good. It's Friday night, just before the madness of another season begins. So yeah, here for it. Let's go.
Here for 100%, mate. You're on the tea, I'm on the black tea. Gav, you've coming in late on as a late substitute. You've come in to help us along the journey tonight, mate. How are you?
I'm good. I'm intrigued. Anthony, what's the mug that you've got? Is it a Celtic mug?
Yeah, just the Celtic, mate. It's just like a kind of drone view of Celtic Park right the way along. Wee Christmas present from my daughter, I think, last year before. So yeah, it's one of my favourites. And I've also got, for the old juice, I've got the club crest. So I'm basically advertising the superstore tonight. So yeah, we're all good.
Basically what it is, Tony's the person that the Celtic board advertise to on a daily basis. That's exactly what it is.
Got the pre-match kit on pre-order as we speak.
Gal, what about yourself, mate? You're wearing my favourite ever Celtic top. I absolutely love that top. It's unbelievable.
It's a lovely kit.
What player does it remind you of?
Petrov.
Yeah, Petrov. Aye, no, I'm good, mate. Happy it's Friday. One of the rare days where we've actually had a wee bit of sunshine today. For my lunch break, I was outside doing some gardening, and then afterwards went down to the park with my daughter. And I've got a bicycle which I bought during COVID, and since COVID finished, I never got back into using it. So I pumped up the tires, took it down to the park, and I was back on it. It felt like such a foreign experience, but maybe that might be the road back to fitness, but we'll see. Anyway, I'm all good, and I'm looking forward to the weekend, mate. How are you?
Man, I'm grand. I was saying to Tony when we were just waiting on yourself coming on and about to go live, I'm just exhausted. It's been a long week in work. A lot of our heavy hitters were off, sick and holidays and stuff, so a lot of us had to carry the can. But we got there, got over the line. It was a good week, you know what I mean? So yeah, looking forward to a good chat tonight. And in the comments, I appreciate, by the way, there's about 50 million Celtic podcasts on live at the moment, so I know people will be switching in between, and that's what everyone does. People just tune in to different ones. But if you want, fire in your comments. Thomas Burns is with us already. There's been a lot to talk about today. Tony, you put something interesting into the group chat probably an hour or two before we were coming live, and I just want to kind of gauge your opinion on it, because I feel the exact same way. Flag Day's coming up, but for some reason, I don't have the bit between my teeth. I don't know why, but I'm sure we'll get into some maybe reasons too, or maybe things that contribute to that feeling throughout the podcast. But last year I was buzzing for it, the year before I was buzzing for it, and I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because we had a shite Como Cup and got absolutely thrashed by Ajax 5-1. I don't know, things like these play in your mind, but we're playing St Mirren on what should be a cracking Sunday afternoon fixture. Mixed days unfurling the flag, but just for some strange reason I'm not feeling it in the bottom of my stomach like I usually do. I just don't know. I know you're feeling the same.
Well, that's it. I mean, and I mean, don't get me wrong. We've got a bit of a hectic Saturday, and then it'll be we'll be leaving a wee bit later than what we normally do for a Sunday game through to the match on Sunday. But I dare say once I'm there, you'll get back into the swing of it. But as I was saying in the group chat, mate, I don't know if it's been because granted, normally we sometimes have World Cups on or Euros or whatever as well, but I think just obviously it was a massive disappointment losing the cup final, and then it just felt like we went straight from there into the Club World Cup nonsense, and which I think it was either last week or the week before. I think it was James just summed it up. I was like, that's exactly what it is. I think Ross had asked the question, do we think it could ever grow in prestige or whatever? And James just shrugged his shoulder and he says, it's just the world's biggest money laundering exercise. And I went, that's exactly what it is. It's just an absolute bit of nonsense for all these major clubs that have got themselves in hundreds of millions of pounds of debt to get round all the financial fair play rules. That's all it is. And I think it's been a summer where everything that I would despise about football turning into, it was like it was getting advertised at the World Cup, you know, just the kind of almost Fox Sportsization of kind of football, and the individual players getting announced on. Michael Buffer for the boxing doing the let's get. It's just basically everything that could be possibly wrong about football was summed up in that 4 weeks, and it's just and then we've had the full hangway of, you know, whatever, Beth Mead's now England's greatest captain over Bobby Moore and all that garbage as well. It's just you just get a bit bored with it. I could easily have done another 4 weeks without the football, to be honest. But needless to say, the proper stuff's back. The Celtic are back, and as I say, maybe it's just because I think it's ridiculous that Celtic aren't opening the campaign. I know it's not necessarily a nailed-in tradition where we do it all the time, but the accepted tradition is the championship. I didn't, Thomas. No, it was absolute garbage. It was one step above. It was essentially a glorified pre-season tournament. I think that the Premier League series that's on now is more intense than it. It's apart from the South American teams, nobody else was caring two jots about it. Where was it there? And as I said, the champions should open the new season. That's what it was. Kind of in the early days of televised football, but the fact that we're almost like the last knock-in on a Sunday afternoon at 4:30, it just kind of blunts the enthusiasm a wee bit, I would say. But like you say, once we get there and the maestro walks on with the trophy and we unfurl the flag and it's, you know, all systems go again, sure we'll get right back into it. But for the moment, I'm still in pre-season mode.
I'd certainly echo what you're saying. No doubt when I watch the football on Sunday, that I'll be feeling obviously excited and stuff to see Celtic play, Gav. But I don't know if there's obviously, you know, we're going to get into contributing factors like transfers and Rodgers and distractions that we've had during pre-season. But I think Tony makes a great point. Like tournaments like that, Club World Cup, you know, it kind of disenfranchises you from it. You know, I didn't even watch any of it. I was down at my mate's house for the final, and it was a placeholder on the TV. It didn't even interest me one iota, to be honest. I was more interested in getting pissed and talking shite and losing all my money at poker. But regardless of the fact, you know what I mean? It's things like that, you know, that kind of, you're going, the love of the game's kind of fading out with tournaments like that. And it's obviously us, the Celtic supporters, we love our club and we can't control them factors. But it's been a weird kind of feeling this pre-season leading up into Flag Day. Obviously, don't know how you're feeling because you didn't respond to what Tony put in. But I mean, would you go along with them thoughts, or are you buzzing like you always are for a Flag Day?
I totally get Anthony's kind of ire towards the Club World Cup thing and the kind of growing globalization of football. But for me, that's not a factor in how I'm feeling for Sunday and the kind of the enthusiasm or lack of enthusiasm. My feeling about Sunday and the kind of the excitement is probably more down to what Celtic have done during the summer in terms of the transfer window, because that's the kind of the soap drama that we tend to focus on domestically anyway. So I won't get into that too much, but I would say that that's probably played the kind of only contributing factor to any enthusiasm or lack of for the Sunday. But I think you're right. Whenever the game kicks off, or if you're actually going to the game, as soon as you're kind of walking towards the stadium, you know, the kind of that excitement, you know, that love will just come back immediately, even before kickoff. Whenever you see Paul McStay, that'll be a fantastic thing as well. But I agree with your comments about the Club World Cup tournament as well. I just don't like the kind of the Infantinos of this world and their need to kind of please certain kind of stakeholders in their own world. I actually read about it that the Ligue 1 2 seasons ago, so the 23-24 season, they had actually reduced their teams from 20 down to 18, and that was to reduce the fixture load. And apparently there was certain pressures placed by FIFA on domestic leagues in order to kind of reduce the domestic fixture load, so that elite teams can take part in these, new tournaments and the growing fixture list. And there was someone, one of the top guys in the English Premier League, said that they will defend their domestic league, that's the bread and butter, and they will keep it as 20. So I know that that's probably not something that we're a fan of, the English Premier League anyway, but I think it's a positive step that they're kind of ring fencing that from the kind of globalization of the sport. So I think that should be a thing. But yeah, I've got a lot of suspicion towards Infantino and the kind of growing initiatives that they've got for world football. Yeah,
I actually think you couldn't have, in my mind's eye, when the last wee rodent slipped off the Blatter, his name was, I thought, could we find a more immoral, corrupt, that just so openly and brazenly corrupt human being to be the president of the governing body of the game? And incredibly, we actually seem to have got worse. We now, he's a MAGA zealot presiding over football. That's essentially what he is. And it's absolutely incredible just how these, for want of a better word, psychopaths, how these morally bankrupt, just lack of self-awareness vacuums just seem to always end up in these positions of huge influence. And they're the governing body that is supposed to make the game through the grassroots to the very elite at all levels. It is meant to be the governing body for the good of the game and to make the game better. And it seems to be, for me, at least as a working class fan, every single sort of thing that they implement or every idea they propose is just pushing the ordinary punter further and further away to line the pockets of, corporate pigs that wouldn't know, but probably think they're watching touchdowns every 5 minutes. It's the game itself is in a sad state of affairs.
Well, I mean, you look at the Celtic season book, that Newcastle friendly that kind of put a point out there. They charge £25 a ticket for that. Do you know what I mean? That's shambolic. Them types of things should be always included in the season book. I know it always was, but previous years you always got a game here or there. But it seems like you said, these corporate, people just care about making money, and that's about it. And I kind of want to start, obviously, with the whole Brendan Rodgers thing today, Gav. There's been a lot of talk about his press conference. I think the fan media put a lot of good questions towards him. Celts are here, especially. I think his name was Michael Shearer, I believe it was. I was watching his clips of what he was saying to Rodgers about potentially signing a new left back, for example, his new deal situation. And it was, some of the quotes were interesting. I know he said some things after the Ajax game that probably just went under the radar in terms of coverage, but he's really doubled down for me and what he was saying, and it kind of played a part in the title I put of the podcast today. It's maintain or build. It's a dilemma. And Rodgers has spoke about that today in terms of, his talks with Michael Nicholson and Dermot Desmond during the summer. He's confirmed as well there's been no new deal offered, so there's no new deal on the table. So the whole thought process of Rodgers stalling the ball until the transfer window has concluded is totally off the table, because that's not true. And then he spoke about today, if Celtic just want to maintain currently, he won't be the man for the job. It'll be another person. Quickly followed up by, if they want to progress and build moving forward, he'll be happy. It sounded like to sign a new deal or come to an arrangement. So it seems like to me that Celtic are at a crossroads. And at the moment, we've stalled. I don't know, that it's obviously the board element of this. Rodgers has set out his stall. We need to cross this road pretty quickly, because this is going to be a major distraction throughout the season, in my opinion. I think the mainstream media will pick on this every week. It'll be a subject every week. Why have you not signed a new deal? Why have you not done this? Why have you not done that? But before we get into ins and outs of transfers, and other things about board members, like probably Lawwell, is he still involved? Seeing them comments today was very brazen, Gav, wasn't it? It was very obvious what he was saying, in my opinion. And he just, as he said, for honesty and clarity, he finally told us what the crack was.
Yeah, definitely shots fired by Brendan Rodgers today. And it's probably been the most passive-aggressive, if you want to call it, comments that he's made so far this season. Yeah, I totally agree with that with Thomas Burns. Brendan Rodgers is the best manager that we can afford, and we should back him. Yeah, so the comments, yeah, he's kind of upped it a notch. And I don't think we can disagree as fans. I guess one kind of fair question that we can genuinely ask ourselves as fans is, over the past, well, this century anyway, have we been a club who maintains, or have we been a club that genuinely pushes on? And you could say that the difficulty with that is the league that we're in. I think that's a fair comment. But whenever we're talking about short-term history, what Brendan Rodgers did last season was tangible progression. With the change of the format of the Champions League, we had, albeit a favourable draw, but we took advantage of it and we progressed to the next stage at the first time of asking. So Brendan Rodgers can use that, cite that as evidence of tangible progress, and so then he can go back to the board and say, well, back me. So what does backing look like? Does backing look like the kind of the transfer fees that we shelled out for Adam Ida and Engels? Probably, yeah, probably. I guess something that's in the background, more kind of cohesion, people working together as a group in terms of the recruitment. And you want all those kind of things to kind of fall into play to better Celtic and to kind of continue that progression. So Brendan Rodgers could say, yeah, he's not been back so far this transfer window, and he's writing his comments to say that. Does it help his cause? Don't think it does. I don't think it does. But and is he playing to the gallery? Is he making us, the Celtic fans, aware that he's on our side, that he wants to push on? I think it's a bit of that as well. I would love the board to kind of reciprocate and back him, but I think that the board will just do what they normally do. They might replicate last season and give him some, big transfer fees for people that he's identified or that the scouting department's identified. So there might be a replication of what we saw last summer. So does that count in your eyes as progression? Perhaps giving him the tools, and it's his responsibility to go out and kind of transform that on the park into results. But it's another kind of interesting point that he said, where he's not the manager for maintaining. I think you got that impression at his last job in Leicester. They weren't backing him at all, and I think he gets sacked from Leicester. Not really consequential of where we're at right now, but probably irrelevant. But he was in a position where he wasn't being backed to progress whenever they did reach last five FA Cup winners. He wasn't given the tools to progress from there, and he finds himself in a position right now where we're kind of meandering along. There's still a few weeks left in the transfer window, so we might be able to pull a rabbit or a couple of rabbits out the hat. But at this moment in time, if we take a screenshot of where we're at right now, then yeah, you can totally see where he's coming from, and I think he's justified in saying that. But I don't know if it's going to cause or provoke the reaction that we want as fans.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation, in my opinion. He always speaks, Tony, about, when he first joined, obviously, way back when, about the Holy Trinity, the board, the supporters, and the team connecting. It feels so far away from that. And if, to me, all the success, and look, I appreciate the success, but the divide is bigger than ever between the boardroom and the Celtic support. I think the board can't read the room. I think we still don't have an explanation of why we're sitting on millions and millions of pounds in the bank. And I think it was quite telling. And look, not to go over old stuff that we talked about in the podcast before, but describing Shin Yamada and Inamura as club signings, he's basically quick to wash his hands off them in case they don't work out. He's covering his own back in that, in my opinion. And he did confirm that the scouting department will make signings for future years to come, development players and things like that, albeit Inamura and Shin have made good impressions, but he was quick to say they weren't his guys, so to speak. And then kind of backing that up with comments today. And look, I'm not going to, I think you're probably more of the, again, not going to put words in my mouth here, lenient in terms of what we're seeing this summer, where you maybe get myself and maybe McGinty and sometimes Gav and James who are like, fucking get it done now. But it feels like to me, Rodgers is reaching that stage at the minute. And he's come out, he's talked about having players in that Portugal camp. He didn't get that. He's talked about having new players in for that league tournament. He didn't get that. Now he's looking ahead to the end of the transfer window, and he said he hopefully can get players in. It doesn't sound like a good situation. It sounds like there's a disconnect somewhere. I don't know what is causing it, because he said that the discussions were good by all accounts with Dermot and Michael Nicholson. He confirmed that today. Still no concrete offer, obviously. And then he's gone on about, as Gav rightly said, he's not there to maintain, because that kind of hampered him at Leicester. The whole transfer stuff, that didn't back him with transfer fees, and then they just plateaued and fell off a cliff. Not saying Celtic are going to do that. I think what Gav said is probably a relevant point, but it's good to point out the roadmap his career type thing. Where do you stand on these comments today? Are you a bit more of the brighter side, or can you see the negativity coming through them?
I'll be honest, mate, a bit of both now. I've got to say, I've not watched it. I've only read the sort of, there was one of the snippets that yourself put up, and I seen one on, I think it was Facebook, but it was a separate quote from it. But largely, the point he says, on the positive side, you're absolutely right in the sense that I think in an ideal world, Brendan Rodgers wants to stay at Celtic. I think if he had, 3 wishes, I think that would be one of them that he would want to sign. But Brendan has got to look after number one, like all football managers do. And I think he's quite right in the sense of putting his cards on the table, in the sense of saying, he wants to do more, to progress further in Europe, build on the good sort of progress that we made last year, as Gav pointed out. And I think he's still a bit scarred from, not necessarily him necessarily personally, but obviously we know what happened first time round. And he says himself was part of the reason for him coming back was that he felt he had unfinished business at the club, and he sort of, he nailed he put his heart on his sleeve when he says, unless I get binned, I'm going to be here for the 3 years. So it's a double-edged sword. In one way, he's backed himself into a corner, in the sense that if we were doing really well and suddenly, a job became available in England that would very much, he would fit the profile for, he has sort of, committed himself to these 3 years. So I've never been, throughout this whole 3 year process, I've never really been of the opinion that he was ever going to move, which as you know, I'm a Brendan, acolyte, if that's the right word. I adore the man, and nothing would make me happier than for him to say he's signed another 5 year deal or whatever. But I think his comments today, I think, can only speak sense to me. I think he's prepared to stay at Celtic, but he's got to have the support that he wants. As you say, you rightly say, although the circumstances slightly different at Leicester due to obviously the death of the owner who bankrolled the club and stuff, and that the family weren't prepared to put in the same level of investment as he had, and you see for yourself just exactly how that's panned out. They lost Brendan, they were relegated, they've came back up, and then they were very quickly back down again. And I'll be honest, I can't see them coming back up, to be brutally honest. But yeah, I think any football manager just wants to be able, he wants to be, obviously wants to be successful, but he wants to feel that connection with the support. I suppose like anyone in your line of work, you want to feel wanted and kind of supported, not just by the people that you work with, but your bosses and that as well. And although, yeah, you're absolutely right, I would put me, Ross and Willie in the more kind of lenient category. I think what I've always said is a lot of the negativity, I think in terms of a lot of different topics can end up getting sort of blended in with the same frustrations, and then that's where it can end up kind of going off on kind of tangents that it need not. But no football manager could ever be criticised for thinking we are literally now less than 48 hours away for the start of the season. Negrin certainly looks like he's going to be a good player, and the players that have came in so far, none of them look particularly as if they're fish out of water. They've all kind of contributed. I even thought, when they were over in Ireland, that Osmond he was getting himself in good positions and stuff. But I think what Brendan himself and what the supporters want to see as well is a couple of signings at least of not just guys that will be there to back up for KT or can fill in if Maeda's injured or anything like that. Is boys that are going to come in and say straight away, like we're here to, we're not here to take part, here to take over, sort of thing. They're going to be basically competing to go straight in to be that improvement on the players that are already there. And I think, regardless of whether you're pro or you're more lenient or you're more frustrated, the simple fact is that so far is not materialised. And when it gets to this point, when you start getting into August, you can absolutely see Brendan in a lot of the fans' point of view. And, I don't know if it's because the fact that certain players aren't available or whatever. I don't know anything about, as a player, the one that we seem to be, there's been reports that we've kind of lowballed a couple of offers. As I say, I don't know enough about him to pass comment on that either way. But I don't think I don't think supporters or the manager can be criticised too much for nothing more than expecting a couple of new arrivals in for the start of the domestic season. I think that's perfectly fair.
Totally. And again, you say that about supporters, and Brendan not to be, criticised for saying that. But I've seen online and also in our group chat, if people are suggesting to bring in 2 or 3 players of quality signings, we're hit with, what's quality? What's this? What's that? So fans have been asking for it, but some fans then turn around and go, stop bedwetting. It's a process, all that pitch. So you're saying that now, but there's been times where I've seen in the past where it's like, we're only 4 weeks in or only 6 weeks in, but now because Brendan said it, it's like, no, yeah, he's right.
But Bill, I don't think that they can.
I'm
be
not saying you, by the way. I'm just saying overall.
I know. But the point is, when literally it was like, you're talking mid-June, middle of June, when these kind of things start happening, and it just grows and grows and grows, and then we've not got to end in the first week in July or the second week in July, and when people are reaching boiling point because we've not signed anybody by the end of June or the 5th of July, you can understand why some fans go, right, listen, simmer down and let's just wait and see. My point being, when it's now the start of the domestic season, those frustrations carry more weight, is my point. And I still do, like as Gav says, I still do think there will be players of that kind of quality in before the window closes, obviously. But what I'm just saying is, I say that those frustrations carry more weight the longer it goes on. We don't know what those reasons are. I think, and as I said, sometimes that's when things fly off the handle when they say, the board are deliberately sabotaging and all these kind of things, and that's when it ventures into what I would class as the kind of silly element of that side of the argument. But what I think this board can be accused of is being what you would probably say a bit more, and I don't mean in the political sense, I mean in the kind of social sense of being a bit more conservative. And I mean, maybe not pushing the boat out. And I'll always stick up for them to say, I don't want, like with the Kritz Garden deal in January, if there's a team acting the goat, I don't want Celtic just to pay the going rate for the sake of paying the going rate. By the same token, if a team, and they, the scouting systems and all that, all of those guys will know a lot more about individual player worth. If there's a player that Brendan specifically wants and he's available at a realistic price, I'm just plucking a number out the air here. If there's a club willing to sell to Celtic for £4 million, right, let's just say for £4 million, and the player wants to come, everything's set up, that's when I don't, and again, you don't pay much attention to what papers say as well, because they can, sensationalise a lot. But if Celtic are then coming in with an offer of 2.2, that's where I think we're acting the goat. Do you see what I'm trying to say there?
Yeah.
So I'm certainly never going to criticise people for making bad deals and spending a tenner on a fiver player, shall we say. But by the same point, I think probably my favourite perfect example last year, Adam Ida wanted to come to Celtic. Brendan Rodgers wanted Adam Ida to come to Celtic. there was a deal there to be made, but perhaps a bit of dithering, a bit of poor negotiation skills ended up being that the price went up rather than what a lot of supporters would have deemed in the more acceptable bracket. So that side of the argument, I always think's fair. I just think when it's getting made 2 weeks after the end of the season at 100 degrees Fahrenheit, that's when it can kind of lose its effectiveness. And
I get that.
You get it, yeah. So that's what I'm saying. But hopefully, as I say, and we can only go with hope. That's the only thing we have at the minute. Nothing would make me happier than some proper players coming in, but more importantly, and I think, and this is where I think we have fell by the wayside, is one way or the other, something should have been, because like you say, I think this is going to fester now, Brendan's contract situation. It's going to, any time we lose a goal, it's going to be the classic camera will go into the dugout. He'll get asked about it specifically when things aren't right. If God forbid something goes wrong with the Champions League qualifier, or we lose the first derby, I'm just trying to do worst case scenarios here. All of those elements, the press will be on it like piranhas because that's not been sorted. And one way or another, it would be good to know if Brendan's going to be in the dugout next season. I certainly hope he does, but until we hear otherwise, we're not going to be any the wiser until such time that we hear anything official.
I think clarifications needed pretty quickly on that situation. And Tony, you made some good points. I think one of the players that you're referencing was the go-ahead Eagles winger, Jacob Broom. I think his name is, that they're looking for 5 million for him. We've lowballed him between 1.5 and 2.8 million, and we haven't really swayed from their bids according to reports. And then there's that winger from Royal Antwerp, Balawisha. That's I hope so. I'm pronouncing that right.
Classic Stephen pronunciations.
He's apparently locked in talks with a French league club. So it seems like we're not going to get him through the door, and it seems like we're chasing him for a while. And there was a few good comments. Phil McGinley was talking about Gav. I don't know if you've seen it or brought it up about Rodgers saying that comment today about maybe not being as convincing to the board to get his signings in. Was very reminiscent of the Ange Postecoglou one about not being forceful enough with the board. And we've seen how that panned out after the board actually gave Ange what he wanted, so to speak. And then Pete McLaughlin was talking about, can we see ourselves being on 12 points in September, doing well in the Champions League and having 3 or 4 signings in the door. It's such a... It obviously divides the fans, and I was kind of obviously on the wee back and forth there with Tony about bedwetters and being lenient and stuff. He knows the crack, but I'm probably more of the aggressive side, where if it's 2 weeks in and I don't see anything or any movement, I'm like, what the fuck is going on? And then as it gathers and gathers and gathers, like, it's not to be vindicated, but seeing Rodgers today say that, it's like, maybe I wasn't fucking off the handle when Celtic weren't doing anything, previously to this, because we're always told, oh, we're only 4 weeks in, 6 weeks, blah, blah, blah. But you mentioned backing. There's people mentioning Alameda in the comments about, we were kind of bent over a barrel for that. And I've heard different things from different podcasts throughout, these last couple of weeks. Apparently Desmond calls the shots on all these deals in terms of money being spent. And then apparently it's Michael Nicholson. No one knows the actual full story. And then Tidsdale's just running about with a hat on, trying to look pretty. So no one knows what he's doing. Do you know what I mean? But how are you feeling with I know in terms of everything that Tony brought up there in the comments about, Phil McGinley bringing up that comment about the board, it just feels like we're just taking an eye off the ball again.
Well, that's quite a wide question. Look,
it is.
What we're saying about the kind of the parallels between Brendan Rodgers' comments about not being able to convince the board how significant it is to go for the specific targets that are there, and going back to Ange's days, and there was a similarity. Absolutely, and that kind of does feed into that theme of Brendan talking about progression or maintaining. I think we're more of a club that kind of that maintains, but a steady Eddie club. It's not like we're playing in England where the competition is fierce, and you have to work hard even simply to maintain, never mind progress.
Gav, we do have two sorry to butt in, but let's kind of throw in there as well. We do have, in my opinion, genuine competition this year with across the city. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm not going to disagree with that. So I think everybody would agree that Hearts have got the tools to be better. Hibs
Yep.
under David Gray, they've not, they've done quite well, and you would imagine that they will get better. And who else? Aberdeen. Well, Aberdeen had a great start to the season, but they were really, really bad for the remainder of the campaign, apart from the cup final against us. But they're obviously going to be looking forward to the new season. So, and obviously Rangers, which Rangers are coming, shall we say. It's up to you whether you believe that the threat is real this time. We'll find out. I think that the interesting thing about Rangers, without going into it too much, is for the first time in a hell of a long time, they're actually trying to play pure football rather than just lumping it up to people. That'll be really interesting to see how that plays out, and especially if the threat that they carried against us in the derby games will continue into this game, because effectively they might be trying to play us at our own game. So I think it might just come down to the experience on the field, the talent, who's the better technical players. So I think that'll be really, really interesting to see how that pans out. But yeah, I think overall it probably will be in terms of competition from a lot of teams, fiercer than what it was last season. And although we love to win the leagues and get trebles if you can, I think I watched it on a podcast recently. It's probably undeniable that the most satisfaction you get from winning a league is whenever at times it was kind of nip and tuck, whenever there was a wee bit of doubt about us winning. And sometimes whenever the competition is fiercer, the victory is all that more sweeter. And from Phil McGinley, the Aberdeen game in the second fixture is going to be tasty. They'll be right up for it off the back of a cup final win. Tough test for us. Well, they'll be up for it, but so will we. And we still have to be knocked off our perch. So the question, Stephen, without me waffling too much, was just in general, how do I feel about the? I don't know.
Well, I think it's, as I said, there's been a lot of things today online. I even seen someone said be prepared for Rodgers to walk away in a couple of days. I don't know if it's going to get, that intense, but I think what Tony said is right, that we need clarification pretty quickly to know what direction the club's going. And one question I was going to ask you is both, actually, and Gav, I'll start with yourself since you skipped my last one. The way that Rodgers talked about not being a manager to maintain, it was quite telling to me. But then he followed that up by saying it'll be another person in charge and not him. So can we take that as a sign if Rodgers does decide to leave, that Celtic we're happy with status quo, we'll get someone in just to keep us above water, so to speak?
Yeah. I was actually going to interrupt you to go back to something about Brendan Rodgers' comments, and I guess I'll try and tie it in right now. See, last week when I was hosting for the podcast, we did the agree to disagree thing. One of the questions I asked McGinty and James was, do you think that Brendan Rodgers has already made his mind up about what he'll be doing next season, whether he'll be a Celtic manager or not a Celtic manager? And the verdict was unanimous amongst the three of us that he'd already made his mind up. Now, that's certainly arguable. But one kind of wider question I wanted to ask all of you, please. Do you think that, in general, being a Celtic manager, there's a kind of a shelf life to it that you can overstay your welcome? And I was going to ask you, can you think of the last time a Celtic manager successfully had 4 years in charge? How far back have you gone? Because Martin O'Neill and Gordon Strachan both had 4 years in charge, but both of their final seasons we didn't win the league. Sometimes I'm just thinking about it must be so difficult to remain a manager of Celtic and to continue to reinvent yourself and to keep things fresh and not have the same people giving the same message to possibly a lot of the same personnel. I think that's a real difficulty. And I'm thinking about it. We never had anybody apart from Strachan and Martin O'Neill, which I've said about the fourth season syndrome. How far back are we going? Is it Jock Stein? Because Jock Stein, Billy McNeil, Davy Hay, Billy McNeil, and then all the other people in the 90s. Some people had short-term success, but I think it's very, very difficult to maintain that over the course And sometimes I think that there is a bit of a wisdom in keeping a 3-year shelf life. It shouldn't be binary, but I'm just saying that there's a track record to support that train of thought. What do you guys think about that?
I mean, for me, Tony, if you don't mind, I'll take this one first. But for me, that I'm going to set my stall pretty early on. I've said, look, I don't think Rodgers will be here after next season. So I've already set my heart on that, and I'm comfortable with that thought. I know people aren't comfortable right now thinking it, but I'm just in that headspace where I'm like, yeah, this is his last season. He's done. No disrespect to him, he's done a fantastic job. I firmly believe what you're saying. Correct, Gav. I mean, you look at the Gordon Strachan thing. I think he probably stayed on more out of emotion towards the end than anything else, and obviously that fourth season didn't end well for him. But he was fantastic during his time there. The element of not getting stale and always improving. I think it's a multitude of things, and it ties into what we were speaking about at the start there. The players he's getting in, transfers, are we improving on that aspect of things? Are we getting new first team players in? For example, with Calmac, is he going to retire soon? Can we get someone to fill that void? So you're constantly refreshing the squad. So your message, in essence, shouldn't go stale. And I also think it's to do with coaching staff too. So, for example, John Kennedy and Gavin Strachan, their shelf life has been incredible at Celtic, especially John Kennedy's. Sometimes I think a new coach with new ideas coming in kind of spruces things up a bit, not necessarily the manager, because nowadays it's the coaches on the grass who do the drills, who do the setup, and then the manager oversees that, blah, blah, blah. So it's all about reinventing the wheel. But the answer to the question as a whole, the 3-year shelf life thing excites me because I'm looking forward to who we get next. So that type of thing. But the only thing that irks me about that in this position is the comments that Rodgers made about, if Celtic want to maintain, I'm not the guy. I don't want Celtic to maintain. I don't want someone to come in like a Scott Brown or a Sean Maloney or whoever just to maintain how it is. We constantly need to keep improving. It's like what Tony said at the start, that this FIFA Club World Cup thing, whether we like it or not, paid more money out than the Champions League in some elements. Do you know what I mean? In terms of winning, and in terms of semi-finals, and in terms of group stage phase. We need to be involved in all that shit. We need to find a way to get our heads in there and get our foot in the door, to earn money, capital, bring better players in, better experiences, better coaches throughout our time as Celtic supporters. So it's a catch-22 in that element of things for me. The whole essence is like, are we going to bin Rodgers but keep improving? I just don't feel that right now. I feel like our chief executive is non-existent. He never talks to the press to tell us a vision. Paul Tisdale's come in, and all we know, he's probably sitting fucking frothing himself off in the scouting room, and no one knows what he's doing. Do you know what I mean? It's just he's non-existent in my opinion. And it's the whole communication aspect of things needs to improve. If we were to let Rodgers go, I want someone coming out telling us why. I want someone coming out telling us what's the plan for the future. 5-year plans, 10-year plans. Continuity is what we need, not constantly breaking it up, going back to someone who we've had before. See that talk about bringing Postecoglou back? Pack that in the bin. We do not need that. We don't need that. Why can we not look outside of that stratosphere of who we've had before? It's the same with ex-players. It does my head in. And yes, I'm happy we've got KT back. I'm buzzing about that. But I was against it at the time we were linked to him because of all the variables that come with him in terms of injuries and things like that. And now there's talk about, can we bring Hans back? No, look forward, move forward, find a new Hans, find a new Brendan Rodgers. There's plenty of coaches out there to match ambition and get Celtic better.
Can I briefly just interject to say that, see, in terms of our managerial appointments or people that we do look at, Brendan Rodgers leaves, we're looking at Eddie Howe. We don't get Eddie Howe, we get Postecoglou. Postecoglou goes, and then we want either Enzo Maresca or Brendan Rodgers. Both of them, the option 1 and option 2, both of them were high quality. So if Brendan Rodgers goes at the end of the season, which I do think will happen, I think we've got a track record that we should have faith in the next person that we go for. I don't think it will be a step down to Sean Maloney or Scott Brown. I don't see that. I think that we will aim high for managers, but I don't want to kind of drag it out too long in case Anthony's got a point about the shelf life question.
No, just quickly to touch on what you just said there, Gav, that is, I would agree, it's actually one of the rare things where I don't think the board can be accused of lacking ambition in terms of the managerial search, because you're absolutely bang on. Apart from the quite amateurish way that whether you supported the appointment or not, hiring a man in the shower is a shambolic way of doing anything. But since then, like you say, we had we went for Eddie Howe, didn't quite work out. We got Ange, who, you know, they knew more about him than what we did, let's be honest, and we got a top draw manager there as he went on to prove, and then we've obviously got Brendan back. So I do agree with you on that sense. I don't think it's going to be Brendan Rodgers and then 12 months later, you know, Sean Maloney and Scott Brown, you know, dream team. I don't think it would be that kind of thing. I think if Celtic were to move on for Brendan next year, I think it either would be, depending if he was available, I think it either would be Ange or a known, a well recognised manager of that kind of similar, from that similar pool, should we say? But going back to what you say, I think you're bang on. I think the circumstances with Neil and Strachan, there were similarities, but differences at the same time. Obviously, you know, Martin, you know, his Geraldine, his wife was ill, but you coincide that with the last time that there was significant change in the boardroom, where Peter Lawwell came in, and that very much it was a case of the purse strings were going to be getting tightened. Some fans would say that nothing much has changed in 20 odd years. But, you know, he was essentially built this incredible, expensively assembled team. But its main component, Henrik, had obviously moved on by that point. And, you know, people forget, you know, Chris Sutton chimed in with plenty of goals and assists that year. I think John Hartson himself scored over 30. Obviously, the Craig Bellamy show for the January onwards. You know, we actually didn't, although we finished fourth in the group, there was a few decent performances in the Champions League that year as well. So it wasn't like it was a bad season. It's just remembered because of how horrifically wrong it went on that last day. But you're right, possibly 3 to 4 is possibly in the modern, because football's even changed in the two decades since then. Gordon, I think, again, you're right. I think if he'd won season 3 quite comfortably, and there hadn't been obviously all the off-field heartbreak with Tommy passing, I think there is every chance he maybe would have walked that summer. But I think obviously with Tommy passing, and then the emotional way in which we pulled that out of nowhere and got that third title over the line, he became the first manager since Jock Stein to do 3 successive titles. You know, I think he'd earned that right to stay on for another year. And again, although the football was very poor that year, you know, you were sitting with 2 games to go, and all you had to do was beat the 2 Edinburgh clubs, and you'd won 4 in a row. And like you say, it just became that tired, sort of stale way that, you know, we ended up dropping points against both of them, and that season completely fizzled out as well. So, yeah, absolutely. I think in the modern world, 3 to 4 years probably is the shelf life. The difference being on I think that Brendan, for the modern, you know, the way football is now, he is probably the best type of manager we could afford and attract. I think because he's had the break in between when Ange and that was back, although he's, you know, effectively now managed Celtic for a lot longer than that, even longer than Martin did, it still feels, I still think going to Celtic Park to watch a team managed by Brendan Rodgers, I still think there's a freshness to it. Maybe ask me that again in a year and we might have something different to say, but I still enjoy I think everything that you would want for a Celtic manager. I think he fits the bill. Obviously his ability, that's what we want first and foremost, but I think he speaks so well in front of the media. I think he's a fantastic sort of symbol of the club and what we as fans like to think of the club as, you know, a club and a name that commands respect, even if we're not the biggest fish in the pond in terms of Europe, but it's a name that still commands respect. And Brendan, the manager, is still a name that commands respect as well. So, as I say, for the most part, I do agree that 3 to 4 years probably is the cycle. But if somebody was to sit and tell me right now, grant me 3 wishes, I would probably say Brendan signing a new contract would be one of them.
Yeah. I get you.
Yeah, no, that was a good wee segue there, Gav. Thanks for asking that question. Moving on, because obviously we don't want to labour on the point too much. We've seen Rodgers' comments today and things of that nature. In terms of at this precise moment in time, there's talk. Well, I think he's up at Celtic Park at the moment. Transfer news. Simpson Pusey is what I'm going with at the moment.
Yeah,
Gav,
I think that's a safe bet. Let's go with that.
Let's do it for now. It seems like he's coming in on a season-long loan deal from Manchester City, where he was the EPL 2 Player of the Year. He also played, I think, between 8 and 10 games, also a couple in the European side of things for Manchester City's first team. There's been a lot of thing about this signing, about us going back to the City Well. Kind of going back there again, getting one of their development players and doing the work for them in terms of developing that player, and hopefully goes on obviously back to City and does a good job under Pep and stuff. But where do you stand on it? We needed reinforcements, I think, for the right sided centre half, and I mean Carter Vickers, Simpson Pusey, and possibly Dane Murray could be a good trio to go with for the season. Are you happy with this signing? How do you feel about it?
Myself, yeah.
Yeah.
Right, well, I think it certainly puts Dane Murray's nose at a joint. I think we can all probably agree that he's going to be searching for, well, he's either going to be the 5th place centre-back, assuming Welsh leaves, or he's going to be told you can go out on loan. But I think Dane Murray is now about 22, perhaps. He's had a lot of bad luck with injuries. He needs to be playing. There's no way that he can be kicking about, skulking about in the corridors at Lennoxtown, not getting game time. So he has to go, which is unfortunate, because people would say, well, would you rather develop your own youth product or another club's youth products? And the fact that we don't have a right to buy on this guy, Simpson Pusey, probably means that it's because City rate him highly enough that they want to retain his services. So, okay, that's fair enough. I watched a 10-minute clip of him on online last night. I had to verify my age for it, of course.
Yes, boy. Yes, Gav. That was a good one.
Look, the guy looks really, really impressive, only for a 19-year-old player. He doesn't have Virgil van Dijk pace, so I'll just put that out there. But the guy, Brendan Rodgers, talks about a centre-back who can progress the ball. This guy is all about doing that. He looks very, very press resistant. So whenever you've got a striker running up to him, he doesn't seem phased at all by it. He looks as if he's that type of guy who can show one way and then just put onto the other foot, and he's got a kind of good short burst of pace to speed away from people. He's not ridiculously tall. He looks about, 6'2". But he seems really, really confident in his passing. He looks good at being able to make movements in order to kind of force the ball forward. And he doesn't look to be passing it to his fullback. He's looking at to pass it to the winger who's hugging the touchline, or perhaps an advanced midfielder. He's always looking ahead. So if I think of the perfect counterfoil to Cameron Carter-Vickers, it's a player of that mould. So I guess the one thing going against him is that he's not played that many moments of senior professional football. I think he might have played about 6 games for City last season, but I think he did actually feature in the Champions League. I think he get rinsed, from what I've heard, to get rinsed by Gyökeres in the Sporting Lisbon game. But that guy had the season of his life, so I don't think we can read too much into that, especially for a 19-year-old centre-back who would have been 18 last season. Then I think he'll learn from that. So physically, he'll get better. But I think from a ball-playing centre-back, sorry, more puns, man, for Simpson Pusey. But I think he could be a proper asset. So I guess the question is, you've already got Trusty and you've already got Scales who are kind of battling out for that jersey. Where does he come into the picture with that? I think Trusty will probably be given the nod to start off on Sunday. But I would not be surprised if there becomes a revolving carousel between him and Scales. And I think Simpson Pusey will be given his shot. And I really want him to rise to the fore, because he looks a prospect, and I hope that he's not just going to be sitting on the bench for the entire season. I hope that he's confident enough to take his opportunity. Well, if I talk anymore, I'm going to just start laughing. But he looks really, really exciting. But is he a bench player, or will Rodgers give him a shot? And there's probably something written into these loan contracts anyway. Like, I'm not going to loan you a player if you're not going to play him. So Celtic might get fined if we don't give him X amount of games.
To be fair, you're right. There is always clauses in these deals, and Tony, we've went into the Man City well before. Lots of ex-players. Dedrick Boyata of the like, Oliver Neesham, for example, came from the City academies, and Big Pusey is the next in line to come and join us at Celtic Park on a season-long loan deal. And the act is probably covered for Carter Vickers when he needs it. He can come on the pitch and show what he's all about fitting in the gaps and things like that, Tony. So what about yourself, mate? Pusey and for the Celtic, and how you feeling?
Oh, I'm all for it. It sounds great. Gav certainly put his own spin on it there. Listen, what Gav sounds like, 6'2", likes to carry the ball out, etc. Sounds quite similar to what Christopher Ajer, the type of qualities he brought to the team. So if he's got those kind of abilities, then absolutely, all for it. I think, like with any young centre back, it's going to be a case of can he handle the physicality of the Scottish game, and we've seen a lot of players are able to do it, and some fall away. But like you say, I think in the earliest sort of sense, it'll be Carter Vickers and Trusty. I think it's pretty safe to say that's who we'll start with. But as Gav says, there will surely be opportunities for him to play, and then you then ask the question, is there a chance that we can sign him permanent? Because I don't think it was an obligation to buy when we signed Carter Vickers on loan. But if he can have the same kind of impact that he had, then we've got a right good player on our hands. And we'll just need to wait and see how he gets on with it. But yeah, I'll take Gav's word for it. If that's the type of player that he looks like, then I'm encouraged at that. I think I'm not. I know sometimes people can kind of scoff a wee bit at the kind of loan signings, but I think when they're done right, there is a place for them in the team. And we've had a lot of success in the loan market. More to the point when it's a loan to buy kind of option, I accept. But and as you say as well, Stephen, we've got a pretty decent track record with players from Manchester City. You think back, right? I'm pretty sure it was Samaras, not Man City. Yes. So I think one of the first, and you think Patrick Roberts and so many others, and and Cham Frimpong. It's a well that's done as well in the last few years. So hopefully he's the long line, the latest in the long line of that conveyor belt that can bring us a bit of success. And you never know, depending on how the deal works, maybe a few bob in the future as well.
100%. We'll see how that pans out for Pusey. There was
going to be blown that we're going to have to verify our age to watch Celtic highlights possibly next season, but what can you do?
Oh, fuck. Pusey shoots, he scores, one of them ones. But I seen a couple of mad headlines this morning, Gav, waking up. Obviously, people are making up these rumours, to be fair, to create a bit of interest. But quickly, before we go on to the kind of summary and the match on the weekend, Flag Day, there was Chiesa, Grealish and Sterling have all apparently been linked to Celtic. Can you see any of them coming to Celtic Park this summer?
So I heard that Fulham are also interested in Chiesa. Chiesa looks no. I guess the short answer is probably not. Grealish, forget about it. As Tony Soprano would say. It's probably more likely for a Raheem Sterling, but I think Raheem Sterling he's got a big family, and I think he's very much a London-based character. I don't think he would ever want to kind of leave his home comforts. Guy's made an absolute mint in his professional career, but I would be surprised if he's a day over 30, Raheem Sterling. I think he's one of those players who lost his pace quite early, and that's why Guardiola saw it and sold him to Chelsea and never worked out at Chelsea. He was one of the older guys at Chelsea, and they've sold him to Arsenal or loaned him to Arsenal. It's not worked out. He needs to find a new place. And kind of, if he never had such a high profile and had been such a high earner in his career, then it might actually fall into the kind of category of Scott Sinclair, where you're like, I could actually see that happening, But I don't see it happening with Raheem Sterling. Just from the earning potential that he probably can still command from. If he went to Everton or something like that, that's probably a fucking graveyard if he went to Everton, It would just be a tough shift because he would have to defend as well. If there was no kind of financial constraints and he had no qualms with moving to Scotland, I would definitely take Raheem Sterling. But I don't see it happening. Chiesa, who knows? But apparently Chiesa had a big injury and he's just no longer the same player. He barely got a sniff at Liverpool, so always on the bench. But I think he's a top professional anyway, and he's still in his 20s. I can't see it happening. He's moved to Liverpool. If he's not going to be playing at Liverpool, he might just go back to Italy because I think a lot of Italians end up going back to their homeland anyway.
Yeah, 100%. And I think as well, like what you said, Gav, all them players are good in their own right, but let's be fair, financial constraints, wages and things like that play a massive part in these transfers. Even I can see that, Tony. Even I'm seeing that from this point of view. Do you know what I mean? And probably, I don't know, Chiesa, Grealish, and Sterling fall under that, however big that gap may be. But it's just interesting. I think this is when you enter kind of fanciful land, isn't it? Of what we potentially could do if we had all the money in the world. But it's people making up rumours just for the fun of it, in my opinion. It was just interesting to see the whole Chiesa thing take off, and then you chuck in Grealish and Sterling for good measure.
Yeah, I think it, like you say, it's. I would say it's unlikely at best, and that's me being diplomatic. But and again, it's nothing to do with the stature of the club or anything like that. If Raheem Sterling were to join Celtic, it would be the biggest club he'd played for since he played for Liverpool. But it's just the fact that the geography where we are, there is no chance in hell that we can afford wages at the wage demands he have. I would imagine he perhaps fits the type of profile that, well, I suppose Serie A is having a bit of a renaissance with, kind of senior Premier League players, kind of reinventing themselves there. And of course, now you've got to take into account the Saudi market as well. I would imagine there will be a club or two over there that would be willing to meet his, I would imagine, pretty extravagant demands. I think Jack Grealish is, I think he's just one of the players, a bit of a maverick's probably the best way to describe him. He was absolutely fantastic at Aston Villa, and you could see he was a bit of the darling of the England support at the previous Euros in 2021, and you could see why, because he's kind of personality player. He can make things happen that perhaps he can see things that perhaps others don't do, and he's obviously been very successful at Man City, and he's won a lot, but you can just see it was at the end of the road for him. But again, I don't foresee him swapping Pep Guardiola for the for the bright lights of Parkhead, But listen, as I say, it's nothing to do with the stature of the club or wherever we are. As I say, in terms of the club itself, he would obviously be making a step up, but the financial, the money world that is down there, it's going to be very unlikely you see that those type of signings ever really been made in Scotland. Just it's obscene the amount of money that these guys can earn and demand, but it is what it is. But I do like Jack Grealish. I think he's a bit of a rascal, and I think I've got a lot of time. Like I like listening to him speak and stuff, because you can tell he's just a working class guy who's just really shit hot at football. But you see a lot of the things that are in his family life. He's I think he does a lot of things for charity, and some of the things in his life with his brothers and sisters and that as well, that have got kind of extra needs and stuff, and he just seems like a well-rounded guy that just happens to be amazing at football, and he's reaping the rewards all that football can give him,
And rightly so indeed. Do you know what I mean? Fair play to him getting wage packets like that. But Gav, we'll wrap up tonight. I did tell you beforehand, I'm absolutely tired, so there's no to our marathon tonight. I appreciate you guys were on marathons the last couple of weeks, but I'm absolutely done in, and I just need a couple of hours kept, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
But Gav, coming into Flag Day, obviously Paul McStay is coming, which is fantastic. The Green Brigade are doing a tifo to honour the Lisburn Lions, and obviously the two that passed away quite recently, which was sad. But getting into the game, squad wise, first team, the starting 11, if you want to give me that, and how you feel the score will go, and just your overall feeling getting into the game as well. Obviously facing a St Mirren side that's been, Stephen Robinson's done a good job, to be fair, the last couple of years being in charge.
I watched most of Brendan Rodgers' press conference today, but I never caught the end of it, so I don't know if he made any comments about who will be fit for the game. Obviously, that was today, and you've still got Saturday for more training, and then maybe Sunday morning, perhaps. So I'll try and give you a lineup based on my fears or my assumptions about who will be fit enough to play. So Schmeichel in goal, Kieran Tierney left back, Trusty. I'm going to assume Cameron Cutler-Vickers will play. If not, it'll be Trusty and Scales. Right back, I think it will be Anthony Ralston, just out of fitness. I think AJ only came back into training just over roughly about 7 days ago, and I think he had one game, maybe 2 games, in short succession in the Como Cup. I think came too quick for AJ. I hope I'm wrong, but Anthony Ralston. Midfield, I think that picks itself. It looks like Engels has been dropped to the bench, so that means Hatate, Cal McGregor, and Nygren. And up front, well, Adam Ida. I would start Adam Ida. As much as I'm encouraged by the fact that Johnny Kenny has been getting some plaudits, I think you start off with Adam Ida. You know that I'm not Adam Ida's biggest fan, but I would still certainly start off with him. On the left, Maida, of course, and on the right, it's either Yang or Forrest. And I think because Yang is a younger man, it'll be Yang. So Yang, Ida, Maida up front. Yeah. And then in terms of the game, I don't think it's going to be easy whatsoever.
No.
I was a wee bit surprised that Stephen Robinson never got the Hearts job. Obviously went to Derek McInnes. But I think Stephen Robinson has done a fantastic job with St Mirren, and he was with, who was it? So Motherwell beforehand that he was the manager. Yeah, I think he just sets up his team so difficult to beat. I don't know what St Mirren look like right now in terms of if they've strengthened, they've managed to kind of hold on to their main players, regardless of what budget he's operating under. It's always going to be a difficult game, and they'll fight for every ball. But I'm happy with some of the performers that have came in for Celtic. People like Kieran Tierney and Nygren. So I think that we'll get the job done. But I wouldn't be surprised if we concede. And I think it'll be a hard-fought game.
It's always a difficult game.
Yeah, I think we'll score maybe at least 3, but we'll definitely concede 1 at least.
Yeah, it's always a difficult game against St Mirren, Tony. And I think what Gal said, I was surprised with Stephen Robinson not getting more of a shout for that Hearts job. I know by all accounts, Derek McInnes has done an okay job so far. I think they're unbeaten in his tenure in terms of the Premier Sports Cup and a few other pre-season games that have kept an eye on. Obviously, them signing new players. But St Mirren have spent a couple of quid. They've signed a player called Richard King, a Jamaican international, who was actually linked to Rangers last year for, I think it was £500,000. I think they got him for around about 250. And they also signed a teammate of his who scored over 30 goals in the Jamaican League. I know the level and stuff, but they're still, putting themselves out there to spend money that they probably don't have. So it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting from that point of view to see these new players coming in and fit under that kind of Stephen Robinson hard guy, kind of make it hard to play against 6-foot players and all that type of stuff, that the prototype that he does. But yeah, I mean, as I said, is this Paul McStay's first time back in a couple of years, isn't it? Or a good couple of years?
A few years, yeah. I think he's done. He's certainly done a couple of trophy days, or at least one trophy day that I remember. I think it was maybe the 8 in a row season, and obviously I think the reason they brought him back was obviously that was his shirt number. And I always remember being a wee bit disappointed in the sense that I don't know if maybe all the players had been given a bit of a history lesson on who he was, but it was just a very, I mean, not in a bad way. You can't blame players that maybe don't know the history of the club, but it was very much, it could have been me or you up there, and it was just a polite handshake. But when Kieran Tierney went up, it was like proper hugs and a wee bit starstruck kind of thing. So I says that's how everyone should kind of approach the maestro, So I think you're right. I think he lives over in Australia now, so he's not back too often. But it'll be great. I'm sure he'll get a wonderful reception, as he absolutely deserves. And I've got to agree with Gav. I think Stephen Robinson will definitely set the team up well. Well, we've seen on Trophy Day last year that they're a tough team to play against. But I think hopefully the likes of Nygren will show what we've seen in pre-season and show why we pushed the boat out to get him in the squad. And I'd love to see Adam Ida get a couple of goals and kind of kickstart his confidence at a level as well. For us, I think the team that Gav mentioned, I think that will be the team. And for the reasons outlined, just that if it was up to me and if it was a game of Football Manager, I probably would have. I would start Forrest just for the fact that I think Forrest is comfortably a better football player. But I think just maybe with youth on his side and everything else, that Yang probably will start. But it would be Forrest for me, and it would just be ideal for our nerves if Jamesy can get on the score sheet on Sunday, and then we don't have to worry about him scoring for the rest of the season, because Vernier gave me a heart attack on Trophy Day. But like I say, it's been a bit of a slow build up, but I'm sure once we get there and you see the stadium filling up again, hopefully I think the weather's to be pretty decent and the flag gets unveiled, and we'll just kind of get back into the muscle memory will kick in, and we'll get back to doing what we do best. But it's Sunday's the start of it's going to be another long, hard one, but fingers crossed, another successful one for the boys in the hoops.
100%. And just finally, Typhon McFlustery comes in. Gav, we'll start with you. Score prediction for Sunday.
I'll go for 3-1 Celtic.
Tony?
I'm going to say we're going to hopefully be a wee bit more robust at back. I'll say 3-0.
I'll go a comfy 2-0, like Franny would say. I'll go the comfortable route. But look, I do want to say, look, a hassle-free, yeah. I do want to say, by the way, that's the podcast kind of coming to the end tonight. I appreciate everyone joining us. We're 55 live at the moment, which is fantastic. Appreciate there's other Celtic podcasts on at this time as well, who are rightfully good in their own right, to be fair. But thanks for sticking with us. What I will say is we talked about schedules and stuff before. Getting into this new season, obviously getting pre-season behind us, we'll be looking to maybe add additional, maybe a couple of Sundays during this month. Like Sunday morning show and things like that, either before games or to kind of talk about the game on the Saturday, kind of build up that way. Because what we noticed last year, we kind of overcommitted ourselves and we missed out a lot of days. But we want to start again and keep it going and grow throughout the season. And we're looking forward to another cracking season, talking to everyone on the podcast, getting everyone's opinions, and hopefully Brendan, signs a new deal and gets a couple of players over the line, so to speak, in the next couple of weeks. And we'll be back. We're scheduled to be back next Friday, so we'll keep you updated on that same time, 8 p.m. But thanks everyone for joining us. Thanks to Tony and Gav, and until next time, stay well and keep safe. Hail, hail.